Hi again, everybody. Welcome into an all-new edition of No Holding Back. It's our hockey edition. Fred Pletsch on the bottom with me as always. Freddie, good to see you, my man.
I'm good, and can't wait to talk to this guy, Ben.
Yep. Scott Sandelin is joining us. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing good, guys. I'm doing good. How are you?
We're doing well. And excited to spend a few minutes with you and reminisce a little bit and see what kind of stories we can unearth. So I know there's plenty in your arsenal. I want to read something to you from your bio page from your school. It says his primary mission was to make the Bulldogs a perennial force on the national collegiate hockey landscape and ultimately bring the program's first NCAA championship. Fair to say mission's been accomplished, but I know there's more to do, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think they hadn't changed that for a long time. I told our SAD you gotta update some things too. But no, we obviously have had a really good run here the last 10 years, and certainly there's always more. But it's pretty neat when you look back at it, and to be able to bring this program, not just one, but we've been fortunate to get three. So it's pretty cool, and I know certainly with our community and our university, they're certainly very proud.
Yeah, and I talked with one of your former players. I told you this last week when we chatted, Jade Miller, and talking about a lot of things with Jade, and having no team has won 3 in a row. You got to go all the way back to the 1950s when Michigan did it. That has to matter to you, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? I think it was certainly in our players' heads. I think that's why a few of those guys came back this year, was to try and accomplish that. And when I look back too, it's still hard to believe that we were in 3 championships in a row, and fortunate to win 2 of them. Obviously, we lost to Denver in 2017, but those guys came back for that purpose. And like everybody, when it's kind of taken away from you, it's certainly disappointing. But who knows? Maybe there'll be an asterisk and we can get another crack at it next year.
Yeah. So one of the things that Fred and I are doing on these, and we kind of touched on it, is kind of going back to a little retrospective. We had Frank Serratori on last week, right, Fred? And the stories he had from the area you guys grew up in were tremendous. Yep. So I'm going to let Fred kind of take over a little bit from here. Freddie?
Yeah, let's go back to your roots, Scotty. Hibbing, Minnesota. When I think of Hibbing, I think of Bob Dylan. So one of the famous people from that town. But really just growing up on the Iron Range, and it was all about youth sports. Just from one season must have blended into the other, and you're either in school or playing sports. Is that what your life was like?
Yeah, pretty much. And I was fortunate to grow up in, a traditional neighborhood. We had, 10, 12 guys that we all were around the same age or maybe a little bit older, but we did everything together. And, whether it was sports, whether it was hunting, whether it was snowmobiling, whether it was bombing cars, whatever we did, we did together. And, I feel very lucky to grow up in that era and with the group of friends that I had. But that's certainly what it was. You just went from sport to sport. There was no AAA hockey. There was no extra stuff. It was, you went from, football to hockey to baseball or golf. And the summer was maybe a hockey camp and some skating a little bit. But you did a lot of things with your family, and, a lot of outdoor activities with being at the lake and fishing and being at the cabin and, water skiing, doing all the things. But I think I grew up in a great time, and, was fortunate to grow up with a lot of great friends that we all had the same interests.
Yeah. You mentioned that crazy AAA hockey, which we don't need to get into. I've always been kind of envious of the Minnesota community-based high school hockey system. Was your high school team, were you guys a factor in state tournament play? Because that's one of the great things. Back then, the high school tournament was just as big, just as important as it is now.
Yeah, it wasn't a 2-class system. It was just, the top 8 teams went, so you just still had your 8 sections. So you had your big schools competing against the smaller schools, and whoever survived got to the tournament. And I know when I came through my era in Hibbing, Grand Rapids was kind of the dominant team. I think they had been there 7 or 8 years in a row, and finally my senior year in '82, we knocked them off in the section final to get to the state tournament. And back then it was at the Civic Center with the clear boards, and it was a pretty cool experience. But that event for any youth hockey player, high school player in the state of Minnesota, that's the ultimate goal. And to be able to play in front of 18, 19, 20,000 fans was pretty special. You never forget that. And we had a pretty good team that year. We kind of choked in the semis. We got there and we ended up taking third place, but Edina won the state championship, and they were always a powerhouse. So, but we were in a position to play them in the final. We just didn't get there, but it was just a tremendous experience.
How did the silver tongue to Gino Gasparini get you to North Dakota?
Yeah. Well, a big part of the recruiting process there was Dean Blais. Dean was an assistant coach there, and kind of followed me and watched a lot of our games. I still remember when Dean came to the rink in a suit and a trench coat. You didn't see that very often anymore, but you saw it a lot back then. But he was pretty hot in my trail as far as getting me there and watching, and he played a big part in that. And it was kind of a funny process too, because I remember being at Northern Michigan when Rick Comley and Walt were coaching, and it was back when the rules were a little bit different. I remember watching North Dakota win the national championship in '82 up in Northern Michigan, and that was part of my visit. And I flew back on Sunday, and Walt and Rick drove to my house trying to get an answer out of me. But I really liked that school too. It kind of was like back home in Minnesota, and obviously a real good coaching staff. And I didn't get the call till after they left, when Gino kind of formally offered me a scholarship. And I didn't tell him yes right away. I said I had to think about it. So I know what kids go through, but ultimately I went there, and it was something I'll never forget. It was a great experience to play for Gino, and obviously Dean played a big part in that too.
Talk about those teams, Scott. And I know some of the guys you played on, but for those that don't, share a little bit about some of the teammates you had when you played up there for then the Fighting Sioux.
Yeah, it was a pretty good group. James Patrick, Dave Tippett, Gordy Shervin. We had a lot of guys. Darren Jensen was a goaltender in Philly. He was one of the goalies my first couple of years. But we had a really good older group that I got to learn from. I watched a lot my freshman year, sat on the bench. I was a good sixth guy. I was a good door opener most of the year, but it was just coming out of high school, it was a huge jump. I didn't play junior hockey. I went right there, and when you come out, you think you're pretty good until you get there and see some of the guys there. But ultimately, I got a chance to play with guys like Bobby Joyce, Chris Jensen, Brian Williams, Stevie Johnson, Tony Herkus. So there was a lot of guys over my time there that, actually Brad and I were teammates for 3 years.
Yeah.
And we also played together in Kalamazoo. So just a lot of really good guys, good players that, had a great experience. Ultimately, stayed there to try and win a championship, and we didn't accomplish that. Got to the Frozen Four in '84. And lost to actually UMD in the semifinals. And
go figure.
That was the game they ended up losing to Bowling Green in the championship in the 4 overtimes. But we ended up, I think that's when they had third place games. So we got a chance to play in that, and I think we beat Michigan State in overtime to win third place. But just a great experience. I had great coaches. John Marks was another coach that ran the defense. Learned a ton from him. And Kerry Eads was actually our grad assistant after he injured his neck and came back and couldn't play anymore. So I couldn't ask for a better coaching staff with Gino and Dean and John and Kerry to learn from. And certainly they were instrumental in me getting to the next level.
Curious to get some of your stories or just memories of playing. I never saw the old Ralph or the old, what was it called? Ingolstadt back then?
Yeah, it was the Ingolstadt. It was actually the Winter Sports Center first, and then they later on they Ralph had donated some money then and got that rink named after him. But great barn, certainly held about 6,000 people, but it was probably one of the best atmospheres I felt in college hockey. That's back when we had the low glass too, and
right.
Students are hanging over, literally grabbing opponents, and they let them in before, right before warm up. So the whole student section is kind of like it is now there. I mean, they're pretty crazy, but we used to smuggle in dead gophers and badgers and put them in the garbage cans on the student section because the students couldn't bring them in. So we'd get to the rink early and they'd be out there and we'd kind of sneak them in. And, if there was a goal, as soon as the goal was scored, there was a dead badger flying on the ice or there was dead gophers. So probably get in trouble for saying that now, but it was great. And there was kind of a system down when we played those teams, but just a fun place to play. And the students were, a big part of that. And it was a tough building to win in.
Scott, you turned pro. Obviously, you were a highly recruited college player because out of high school you were a second-round pick by Montreal when it wasn't a 30 picks in each round. But you turned pro a year that the Canadiens and Jean Perron win the Stanley Cup. You wind up in Sherbrooke. Tell us about that transition and when the business side of hockey maybe smacked you right in the face.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to sign after my junior year. And this is back, we didn't have agents until pretty much after you were done. Not like today where you have them at 14 years old or 15 years old. So, I was kind of faced with that decision early and I didn't know what to do. And certainly this is when you turn to your coaching staff because you respect them and trust them and got great advice. And I came back for my senior year and had a good senior year. And, then obviously graduated, but I moved on and went to Sherbrooke right away after my college year was done, after I signed. And then I got a chance to go over to the World Championships in '86 in Moscow. And then I came back from there and went back to Montreal, but they were in kind of the middle of their playoffs. So I was kind of a black ace, but not really a black ace, but got to be in Montreal when they did win and experience that and go on the parade. And it's pretty amazing that the people in Montreal, they knew who I was. I hadn't played a game, but they're pretty hockey knowledgeable people, of course. But it was a cool experience. But started the next year, kind of a tough group to break into. They brought all their defensemen back, so I started the year in Sherbrooke and played pretty much the whole year there. I think I got 8 games up in Montreal, and our team went to the Calder Cup final. So it was a long year, my first year. I think when you go from playing 40 to maybe 50 games at the most in college back then, I think I ended up playing about 106 games. And I left in August to go to Montreal, and I didn't get back till early June. So it was a long first year, but certainly a lot of fun to go through it. And unfortunately, we didn't win the Calder Cup. We lost in Game 7, but it was a good experience and had a couple more years there before I got traded to Philly.
Yeah, and then you talked about playing at the old Ralph or the old arena there in North Dakota. You played another classic one in Hershey. I mean, I was in the new one, obviously nothing like the old one. What was it like? What do you remember about playing in that old barn?
It was cool. It was cool. I do remember they had a little rink that was attached to it too that we would practice in a little bit. And guys always liked that because if we ever did conditioning, it wasn't a normal size NHL rink, so that was fun. But it was a classic rink. It was just a traditional old rink that we got great crowds, unbelievable town to live in. It's about 16,000 people, and they had a lot of nice golf courses too there, Ben. But for a town of 15,000, I think they had about 3 golf courses and another three or 4 within the kind of 10-mile radius. But just a fun place. I've always said too, I would live there. I would move back there. I have a lot of good friends that I met too, not just teammates, but people, in those smaller communities, you get to meet a lot of people and still keep in touch with a lot of those people today. And I just enjoyed the area too. And I was able to hunt and fish. I spent some summers there. I didn't come back to Minnesota. I'd stay out there, and even better, I met my wife in Hershey. So that was good. So another good memory. But really enjoyed playing there, and just a lot of good memories from just the relationships I built with a lot of people there.
Well, if you're a chocoholic like me, no better place in the world to go for a run than Hershey. I think the plant shut down by now, but you're just breathing chocolate.
Everything smelled like chocolate.
Yeah, my apartment was right across, kind of not too far from the factory, so we got a lot of those odors a lot. But we, it was great. That's what we got obviously for Christmas presents. They gave us chocolate, and we got an opportunity. The Hershey Park there was pretty cool to go through too in the summer. And the neat thing about being on the team, we got to go in there early and experience some different rides. We were the guinea pigs, so thank God none of us got killed. But it was a great experience to kind of go through that and have the park to yourself and do things like that there, and along with some of the other things, like I said, fishing and hunting that I did during the season.
Yeah. I know you had to shut it down as a player because of back issues, chronic back issues. Was it something that if that happened today, there'd be a better fix, a better cure, or it was just nothing could really help?
You know what? Probably, Fred. I think, back then too, it was the ironic thing about that too is that was the 88 year, and or excuse me, 91, 92 was Olympic year. And Dean was actually an assistant coach on the Olympic team, and I got hurt in the first half of the year. I think it was maybe later October, early November, and I had been out for probably about 3-4 weeks, and Dean called me and said, "Hey, do you want to be on the Olympic team?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to be on the Olympic team, but I haven't played in a month and my back's bad." And so I kind of went through that, and did go to Minnesota. They gave me some injections to try and settle it down, and I probably could have had back surgery when the season was done, but back then, a lot of people said, kind of stay away from that. You never know how it's going to go. Just try and do what you can. So I did, and I did plan on playing the next year. That was my intention. I trained, and I had some good days and bad days. And I still remember we were in North Dakota. Gino used to run a pro camp, and I was just skating backwards, and my back went out, and I literally crawled off the ice. And I remember staying at Brad Berry's apartment for about 3 days on an air mattress because I couldn't move, and I just said I got to figure out something else to do. And I had some opportunities to go over to Europe. I think it was the year Tampa came in. They were interested until they found out about my back, and ultimately I decided that I'm probably done. I probably, like I said, could have done a little bit more surgery wise, but I've always kind of had a passion to coach too, so I didn't want to get out of the game, and that's kind of led me to where I am today with a kind of an interesting start back in Fargo.
Yeah, the Express. Interesting team and an interesting league, was it?
Well, it was unique. I got wind of a league that was starting. It was 3 guys that started, a minor league. They called it the American Hockey Association. And I mean, it was dial-a team, man. I felt like I was trying to get a softball team together for a weekend in the summer. And I spent a lot of time on the phone and calling guys, and, got some help from different people. But there were 5 teams in the league. And I ended up coaching in Fargo. We played in Moorhead, actually, but the league lasted into January. I think we played 30 games, but they were having obviously financial trouble. Shocking, right?
Yeah.
But we were doing pretty good. I think we were tied for first in the league, and it was a great experience. And unfortunately, we tried to keep the league going, and I actually tried to keep it going in Fargo, not necessarily in that league, but I thought it could be. I always felt Fargo could be a really good American League city, so tried to figure out how to do that. They just didn't have the facility at the time to really make that happen. So, but there was an interest. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But so I got out of that for a while, and then when Dean got the job at North Dakota, I was fortunate that he asked me to come and work with him, and I've been in college hockey since.
Well, you got a couple rings there. You didn't get one as a player, unfortunately, but you got a couple there. Take us through those years, and obviously the championships are the highlights, but what else stood out, maybe in terms of you developing as a coach? Those are probably things that really stood out, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I joked, Ben. I said they won before I got to North Dakota the year after I left, so that they got rid of the crap, and they got the good guys in there, and they ended up winning. But no, just to be on Dean's staff and learn from him. I mean, obviously, first couple of years, Jimmy Scanlon was an assistant coach, who's now the head coach at Bemidji State for the women. Marco Siki came in '97. which is the year we won our first championship at North Dakota. And that was also the year of the flood. So there was a silver lining that we won, but it was pretty devastating to see what happened to that community. But Mark was there for a year, and then he went to Green Bay. But he was part of the '97 team, and then Jeff Bowen came in, and so I had some different people to learn from. And but ultimately, just having the opportunity to work for Dean was incredible. He gave me a lot of responsibility, so I was able to grow as a coach. But just a tremendous guy to learn from, and one of my best friends to this day. But we did a lot of things. It wasn't just about hockey. I mean, he's an outdoors guy, and he likes to hunt and fish, and he doesn't like the media conferences. I figured that out only when he wins. But no, we had some fun with that. But we'd go hunting together, and then obviously Ben, his son, lived there too, and the ironic thing is when I went to Duluth, Ben also left at the same time because his wife, Angie, is a teacher at UMD. She's a speech teacher in UMD. So he always says he kind of lost his two best friends. But I owe a lot to him for sure to be able to be in the position I am today. And, the success we had there, winning those championships with those guys. The ironic thing, I don't think they were our best teams. But they were maybe talent-wise. Well, we had, and I said that coming in, even to Duluth, I felt like 98, 99, we had Jason Blake and some of those guys that were really talented players, and we had good teams that didn't win. But that's how hard, I realized how hard it is to win, right? To win a championship. So you really take a little bit of those things, when you move forward, and you have a great appreciation for, like I said, how difficult it is. And when you get those opportunities to be in those situations, you hope you can be successful. And that's a couple of things for sure that I learned. And a lot of those first two championships kind of mirrored our first two championships at Duluth. And, because it had been a long time since North Dakota won. I think it was 82, right? Or excuse me, 87. So it was about 10 years since they won. Yeah. And, the people up there get restless, they're a little bit. To have that happen. And the unique one in 2000 was I knew I already had the job at Duluth, but I still had to, do my job as an assistant there. And so it was a great way to go out, winning that championship in Providence with that group and moving on to Duluth.
When you get to Duluth, was there some stagnation in the program, obviously? And, a lot of coaches take over now, talk about culture change, and they need to change the culture. I don't know if it was like that. But who were the guys that kind of changed the culture for you, the players that you brought in? I know you had a solid staff with Rawls and Mark Strobel as well.
Yep. Yeah, it was tough. I mean, we all kind of knew, it was going to be a challenge, but it was great to have those guys part of it. I think, getting here, I had to make some tough decisions, right? Obviously I've seen them play. We played them a number of times. I knew some of the recruits they had coming in. The one guy I did keep for sure was Junior Lassard, who ended up winning the Hobie. So
good coaching.
Yeah, that was an easy one. But there were some tough decisions. But I'll be honest with you guys, we did basically a 3 or 4 day camp where we set up and we said, you guys go play and show us what you can do, and we're going to give everybody an opportunity. And probably wasn't the greatest way to do it, but I felt it was fair. And in turn, we unfortunately got rid of some people and we kept some people. And we had a tough year, though. I mean, we had a 7-win season, but I just felt that the group was, you're learning your guys, and you're learning kind of who can play the way you want to play, which tends to how you recruit moving forward. But I thought there was a lot of guys that were in the program already that just didn't have a lot of confidence at the time. I think they were good players. I just think they just lacked some confidence, and some of those guys got that back. Some of them didn't. But there are some guys that stayed with us beyond that first year that really developed, and they were a big part of kind of us getting better every year until we got to the Frozen Four in 2004. But we had to recruit differently too. We were recruiting older players. We weren't getting the high-end studs all the time, and we just kind of went for the older players, and those guys were were a big part of that early success. And then we hit a little bit of a lull again, and we had to change our recruiting again, kind of in the late 2000s. And we brought in guys like Jack Conley and Mike Conley and Fontaine, and we felt those were guys you could build a program around and probably would be there for 4 years. And they certainly were, except for one of them. But they were tremendous in kind of where we are today. I think that year was really critical for us as a program. And I think there's no question that's why we are where we are today. I think it's helped us grow that culture and grow the program for sure.
Well, you said it, Scott. It reminded you of your program, being in North Dakota as an assistant. So it was 11 years, I guess, in essence, once you got the first one. What still comes to your mind first when you hear that about winning the first one?
Pretty elated, I can tell you that. I mean, it's just such a great experience. I remember making a comment when I got the job in Duluth, and I just said I came to Duluth because I always felt you could win in Duluth. I grew up around the program. I grew up an hour and 15 minutes from here. I watched the program. There's a lot of great players. I could never figure out why they couldn't get over the hump. They were really close in the Brett Hull, Norma Kyber, Billy Watson era. They went to 2 championships, obviously lost. So I got to see those guys firsthand. But, there was just kind of spotty success. But I just always felt you could. I thought it was a great place to live. It was a great hockey town. We got a great fan base. It's a good size, it's a middle-sized school. There's a lot to do. But again, some people are looking for different things. And I think that's why we are, again, where we are. We're getting the players that, kind of fit what we are. And, we got some guys that come in not as hunter, guys that hunt or fish, but they leave learning how to hunt and fish, which sometimes is scary because I'm not sure I want to be in the woods with some of those guys that learn how to hunt. But, it's just a unique community. And I think, it's a blue collar kind of area. And I like to think that our teams are the same way. So, we recruit that way. And, but it's funny when you get kids here that have never been here, whether you get them or not, they didn't know Duluth was like that. They didn't know they're on a big lake. They didn't know it was a city of 90, 100,000, so it's kind of interesting to hear the comments when you get recruits in, and, a lot of them are impressed. And whether they come here or not, that's a good impression for us moving forward. If they tell other kids, hey, it's a good spot, and, you should look at it.
Well, I know you won't feel sorry for me, but 2011, Kyle Schmidt kind of ruined the dream of a young commissioner who'd been on the job for 2 weeks for the CCHA against Michigan. That was a hell of a hockey game.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was a great game. I still laugh when I talked to Mel when Max Tardy scored his goal. I think Red came down to him and said, who the hell is Max Tardy? It was Max's first goal of the year, and he was on our second power play. And I just we still laugh about that. But no, it was fun to watch a little bit of that game. Just you look at the players Michigan had and the players that we had, and look at the success that those guys have had moving on to pro hockey. There was a ton of good hockey players, but it was a great hockey game. The building was unbelievably electric. Obviously for us, playing kind of in our backyard you couldn't ask for a better setting. And, just to have it go that way was unbelievable. And, we didn't wait 10 years to have a reunion. We had a 5-year reunion, and the guys really enjoyed that. So, but we're coming upon the 10th one, so we'll see who's going to be the organizer. But we just didn't want to wait 5 years, and the guys just had a great time. And it's just a great memory. Anytime you do something for the first time, you know how exciting that is. So our community was just thrilled.
Kind of funny how it set up 7 years later against Notre Dame in the very same rink. You've got the crowd with you, and having lost to Denver in the championship the year before, was there that hunger, that sense of unfinished business right out of the gate when everyone showed up?
Yeah, I think so. I think we lost some great players off that team too. The Iafollos and the Toninatos and Pionks and guys like that would have been big parts of our next year. And then Adam Johnson, like basically we lost Miska, we lost our three best players, Miska, our starting goaltender, Pionk, our best defenseman, and we also lost Adam Johnson in July. So there was, as a coach, kind of moving forward, there was a little bit of that doubt, right? But, there was some fire, there's no question, which is unlike kind of the last 2 years where you're worried about guys being satisfied, if you win, how hungry are you going to be the next year? And I thought this year was going to be, a little bit easier because I thought our guys were going to be really hungry to kind of go after three. But I'll be honest, this might have been one of the toughest years early on. It was almost like our guys wanted to just go, let's press fast forward and let's get to the tournament and then we're going to go. But they forgot that there was, 34 games you got to play to get there. But our guys were playing well at the end of the year. But there's no question, Fred. There's no question. Our guys were hungry and, it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out all right. I want to ask you about Scott Perunovich. I hadn't talked about him yet. Same high school. No pressure, right, Fred? His head coach goes to Hibbing. That's where he was from. Scott's career in the 3 years he was there and the way he capped his career off.
Yeah, good thing I got him, hey, from my
Yes.
hometown. Otherwise, but the funny thing about Hibbing's a lot of Gopher people. They've had the Michelettis gone through there, the Poliches. There's a lot of guys that have, that played. Kevin McHale played basketball at the University of Minnesota. So
I didn't know he was from there.
There's a lot of Gopher people
Wow.
there. So we're trying to change that. But no, Scotty, he was certainly a target for a long time. I mean, I knew of him, obviously being from my hometown. I knew the family, but to get him here, we knew he had something special, just when you watch him play. And I think it was really good for him to go to junior hockey and go through some adversity. I think they had a tough year with Cedar Rapids. That year they were really young and just went through a really tough year. And I think that was good for him. Things didn't come easy. And, to get him here, I think Mark Carlson, let me back up. Mark Carlson did a great job. He's a great defensive coach. I think he taught Scott a lot of things defensively. And offensively, I think there might have been some restrictions on the way they play, but I knew when I was getting him here, I was going to let him play. And, we looked at him as a fourth forward and the things he can do. And, I think he just grew. The big question marks were maybe defensively, but you got to sacrifice something, right? I mean, the stuff he can do offensively, the vision he has, the plays he can make, the way he can control a game. You got to let those guys do their thing. And he had an unbelievable freshman year. Led our team in scoring, was a first team All-American. Sophomore year, a little, as we talked before, Ben, injuries. He had some injuries, but still had a good year. I think he had 28 or 29 points and got healthy this year and just was tremendous. I just thought there was one game in Denver where I think I was quoted. I couldn't believe how well he played. And I just said, if they give the Hoey Baker, you might as well give it to him right now because that's how good he was. And it was obviously a big game for us, but he had a tremendous career. I'm excited to see where he's going to go. I really am. I think he's got a great future ahead of him and he's going to get a great opportunity in St. Louis.
Scott, 20 years now as head coach, and there's probably not a lot you haven't seen now, but the NCHC in its 7 years, maybe even more dog-eat-dog than the WCHA was. When you were a younger head coach going up against so many coaches that had won national championships, whether it was Jeff Sauer or Mike Eves, Don Lucia, George Gwozdecky, down the line, were there ever times that kind of made your head spin that you had to learn, wow, what did he just do out there? How does that kind of evolve in making the head coach that you are now?
I think, you know what, I think when you see those guys, I think number one, I can thank quite a few of those guys because, it just seemed like those guys always had the time to talk to you, right? And as a young coach, I still remember a guy like Rick Comley, who I have a ton of respect for. It was one of my first couple of years, Fred, and we were at a tournament. I said, Coach, can I have breakfast with you? I got to run some things by you. And you know what? He took the time. We spent an hour and a half gave me some great advice, and just things like that. I just think those things are so impressionable to me that you could go to those guys, even though they're opponents. You have a ton of respect for what they've done. They'll always take the time, to talk to you, to answer questions, to try and help you. Yeah, you want to compete and beat against them, but it's also good motivation, because it's where you want to go as a coach. You want to have some of those same successes that those guys do. And I'm still amazed when I look at Jerry York and 1,100 wins. I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. And just to do it and be as successful as he's been over his career. Another guy, Ron Mason, the guys that were just kind of pioneers for us, and guys that you looked up to. Those guys certainly, I think they're very instrumental for all of us young coaches, and they just were so professional about what they did. And when you look at when they had success, it was something certainly that you wanted to work for. So yeah, you're picking their brain, you're watching their teams, you're trying to do that. But I can tell you, as a young coach, you're going up against some of those guys. You're not going to outcoach them. I know that. So it's something that you learn early on.
Does that fraternity still exist? You're the championship seasoned veteran coach now. I'm sure you'll take the time, but are the younger coaches asking?
Some do. I think some do. I think it's changed a little bit. I think, I've still got a little bit of old school, because I came in when a lot of those guys, as an assistant, or even played against some of those guys when they coached. But, I think it's so competitive now. Obviously the salaries are different. So the kind of the environment's changed a little bit, but I don't think anybody in our business doesn't, have the time to talk to anybody as far as, trying to help people or give advice. And I know, it's weird, because I've gotten some phone calls over the last few years, and just kind of how we've been able to do it. And, it's great to be able to share some things with those people. So if I can continue to do that and be one of those guys, I don't look at myself as that, but, certainly if it's something that I can do to help a younger coach or help any coach, I'd love to do it, because I think that's why we're all in this business, is to help each other and get better.
Yeah, and everybody's got a video now anyway, so there's really no secrets, right? I mean, you're not giving anything away, so to speak, are you, when you have those conversations?
I think the hockey part is probably a little bit different, but I think, within your programs, I'm actually going to be on another call today. We've got some coaches that we kind of call it coaches happy hour now. We're kind of getting together just to get some hockey talk going. Just share some different ideas, even through this COVID thing, and how guys are communicating with their teams and doing different things. And we're going to obviously continue this through this, kind of meet every week and share some ideas, and whether it's systems or drills or just kind of talk hockey. We did it last week. It was great to see the guys. And I think those things are important. And, we're going to try and get some pro guys on to maybe cover a couple topics, friends that we know that are kind of in the same thing, looking to kind of just talk hockey. And so we're doing that every week with a group of guys, and it's been a lot of fun.
Good to hear.
Well, we like the stories, as Ben maybe told you. So, Scott, it's right off the top, but maybe kind of the strangest, weirdest in-game dressing room speech that you either gave or heard from a coach. Some of the guys you played for include, Gino Gasparini, in the pros, Pat Burns, Pierre Kramer, Don Paddock, all those guys. Anything jump out to you, like left the room and the guys are looking at each other going, did that just happen?
Yeah, Gino used to have some good one-liners. I know that. So we were always, when you first heard him, you were kind of like, what the hell is he talking about? But, I still kind of talk about him now. Like, but I just know one time with John Marks, John, and if John, John Fred, he's big guy. And he came in one time and there was a water jug that he thought was empty. And we all knew it was full, and he was mad. And when John gets mad, he's hard to understand, because he's got that real deep voice, and he kicked that water jug, and we knew he broke his foot or his toe, but he didn't show that. He just kind of kept going, and then he got out there, and what we heard after from Gino and Dean was that he was in so much pain, but we were laughing, and we knew that he broke something, but he didn't show it. But Gino had some good ones. Dean was good. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. I wish you had asked me that. I would have prepared a little bit better.
We'll have to send out the answer, Ben.
Yeah, because that's good. I could probably come up with a lot of. Well, the French, when I played in Sherbrooke, it was hard to understand Perron. We called it the Beck Club, the boys English club. So all the English guys went down to the weight room, and the French guys stayed in the locker room. So we couldn't understand what they were talking about. So we had to go have our own meeting and just talk amongst each other. But we'd let a couple of those guys come down. But it was tough with the French coaches because we didn't really understand what they were talking about, which was probably good because we probably got along a little bit better. No offense to the coaches, but no, it was interesting. I had a different coach every year. I had a different coach. I played 6 years in the minors, and I had 7 coaches in 6 years because I got traded the 1 year. So there was I didn't have the same coach for 2 years.
I feel your pain with the French coaches. One of my first experiences was with Jocelyn Gavermont. Played in Buffalo and Vancouver, and he was talking about the slaughteria. The slaughteria. Well, I couldn't figure out if it was a community disease or it was just, and I'm sure you went through a lot of that.
Yeah, I learned enough. I learned enough French just to know a little bit about what they're talking about. But yeah, there were some words that were thrown out, and we kind of looked at each other and didn't really know what the heck they were talking about either. But once you're around it, you kind of figured it out. But I know exactly what you're saying. It was a tough language at times, especially when you don't speak it or you don't understand it to really grasp what they're talking about.
How about some stories involving some players that you played against? You played against some great ones, as you mentioned a few of those names. Are there any highlights that are still fresh for you against guys you had to go against and defend?
No, I remember I told you I was a good door opener my freshman year.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I still remember sitting on the bench. This wasn't necessarily I was going against somebody, but Chris Chelios was playing at Wisconsin.
Okay.
And John Casey was our goaltender, and Chris came across our blue line, and he's a right-handed shot, and he switched to left, and he zinged one off the pipe from about 60 feet out, right? And I'm sitting there as an 18-year-old freshman going, I got a long way to go. That was probably one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. Like, I've never seen that. And obviously I got to play with Chris in Montreal and be around a little bit more, but I told him that story. I go, I couldn't believe it. Like, I've never seen it. Now you see guys do it quite a bit, but I mean, it was like, it wasn't like a flutter either. It had some steam on it. Let's see what other stories. We had a couple of fights, big brawl in Minnesota, shocking, North Dakota.
I got to be honest, like, I'm not advocating that, but I miss those days of watching like that a little bit, man.
Well, I played with Jimmy Archibald. Jimmy was one tough dude, man. He was great to have on your team. Obviously, his son Josh, right?
Yep.
But Jimmy was Jimmy. I still tell our players this. I said Jimmy had 197 penalty minutes in his senior year, but he had 37 goals. And the guys are like, no way. I go, look it up. And it wasn't, he got a little bit of room on the rink, but I think he's still the NCAA penalty minute leader. But he was a great teammate, but it's still impressive. And our guys still don't believe me. I said, well, go look it up. So it's a lot of goals. We don't have a lot of guys that score 30 in college anymore. But spent a lot of time in the box, but played a tough game. But I played with a lot of those guys there, Dean Decision, Dave Donnelly, I can go on and on about a lot of those guys, but we had a tough group. We played a tough brand,
Did you cross paths in the Montreal system with John Cordick?
Oh yeah. John was on the team. Got to play with John in Sherbrooke a little bit, and also in Montreal. He did bail me out one time. He was fighting. I was remember Jay Miller from Boston, a tough guy. So we had a preseason game, and I was getting into it with Miller, and next thing you know, John's jumping in there because that's what John did. And I'm in the middle of him, and I kind of peel out of there like, okay, this is good. And I told John after, I go, you didn't have to do that. He goes, yeah, I did. That's my job. You get out of there. So, but he probably saved me from losing some teeth. But he was a good teammate too. I mean, everybody had one or two of those guys that you could always count on to make sure they stick up for their teammates and get involved in that stuff. I mean, unfortunately, kind of got caught up in the other stuff, which is sad. But I did get an opportunity to play him and get to be a teammate with him.
Red Berenson tells a story of when he went to college that the GM of the Montreal Canadiens told him if he played college hockey, he would never play in the NHL. Obviously, proved him wrong. So in the mid '80s, when you're coming out of college as a second round pick, as an American players, American players were starting to get their due. Were you treated any differently in the Montreal system, or players were players and you just had to prove what you could do on the ice?
Yeah, I think it was that. I think it was pretty much. I didn't feel like that we got treated any differently. I mean, they had certainly like a system salary wise too with entry level guys. It's not like it is today where there's kind of that. It was. They knew where you were going to be slotted, and if you were played there 5 years, the range you're going to get paid from that standpoint. So you kind of knew that. But no, I didn't feel that at all. Like I thought the interesting thing about our draft year, if you guys go back and look at 1982 and you look at the guys that Montreal took from the U.S., Neil Armstrong was one of the scouts, and I used to see Neil on the recruiting trail before he got out of the business, but. He always said to us, he goes, when I drafted all you guys, I was either going to be driving the milk truck or the Cadillac. I go, so which one are you driving? He goes, I'm driving the milk truck. So we know how we all stacked up. But no, I think Dave Maley was part of that. Scott Harlow and myself, Billy Brow. There's a bunch of guys from Minnesota and the U.S. that were drafted by Montreal that year, and. But we have a laugh about that. But no, it was a great organization. And for me, I think the most unique thing was obviously growing up in Minnesota. You watching the North Stars. I was always a Flyer fan. I always loved Bobby Clark. But you knew of Montreal and the history. In Toronto, the original 6 teams and all that. But when you get there, to really be immersed in that was incredible. It was incredible to learn all the history and tradition, and to have the opportunity to meet the Doug Harveys and guys like that was a great experience for a young player.
Awesome stuff, Sandy. We appreciate you taking a few minutes, man, and sharing some stories with us and talking about your program and all those things, man. So really appreciate you doing this.
Thanks, man. This was fun. You guys, thanks for having me on.
Anytime. Fred?
You're still the champions.
That's right.
You'll prove it otherwise.
Yeah. Put an asterisk, right?
Yeah. Well, best to your family, all your guys, and you guys stay safe, and we'll all get through this. We know that. So Scott Sandelin joining us for Fred Pletsch, Ben Holden. This has been another edition of No Holding Back, our hockey edition. We'll see you next time with an all-new edition.